Welcome to the Learn Tarot with Moxxie podcast, where you can learn to read the tarot for yourself and for others. Here we look at the tarot from all angles, and I share the very best ways to use it to work through past trauma and create the life that you love. So join me. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Learn Tarot with Moxxie podcast. It's Michelle here, and it is, what is today? April 11th. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time if you can hear weird outside noises, but I know a lot of you are in the same boat, and it has been a rough late winter and early spring weather-wise, and we have forecasted anyway, 72 and sunny today, so I'm welcoming in the dogs barking, the kids yelling, the trucks going by, anything and everything, as long as I can open my windows. So happy spring. Yeah, kind of feels like we're finally getting there. This week, we're going to talk about tarot for self-esteem. And I'm going to share with you something I realized like literally over 50 years after a very bad day I had in kindergarten, and I'll share that story with you. I am also going to just answer another question that came up, which is what would I do differently if I were learning the tarot? And that's something I could answer 5 or 6 different times, because I'm sure there are 5 or 6 different things I would do differently now. And lastly, we have another tarot activity that we're going to talk about that is designed to help you start thinking about shifting your tarot practice from just reading the cards that are in front of you to learning to tell a story with those cards, because that's where all of the juice is when we can learn to combine the tarot card meanings in a way that allows us to share a story that provides insight for someone. So, without any further ado, and without any announcements this week, because I just don't want to, I'm not very good at this whole marketing pushing thing. I just don't feel like it today, so we're not going to do it. Today we're just going to jump right in. So, what would I do differently if I were learning tarot all over again? And this question is, and I'm going to answer it honestly. I'll tell you what I would do, and I will tell you why it would be hard for me to do that. What I would do is, first of all, choose the Rider-Waite deck, because that is the standard. It is the easiest one to learn. It is the one on which so many other decks are based, and it is the one on which there is so much information available for free, for courses, for books, everything, wherever you could think of, there's information on that particular deck. What would I do? First of all, I would put the book away. The Rider deck comes with a little tiny white book that just fits right inside of the same sleeve as the cards. And I would take that book and I would put it away. Maybe, just like a couple months. And what I would do before I looked into tarot card meanings is sit down with each card and really look at each card. Because the more I get into teaching the tarot, the more I am learning, because it's forcing me to take a deeper look at things so I can share those things with you. And the more I really dig into the Rider-Waite deck in particular, the more it just occurs to me that if we can open ourselves up to the possibility that just by looking at the tarot cards, we're going to be able to glean enough of a solid interpretation of that card that it's going to be helpful. And then from that point on, when we have gone through all of the cards, when we can say, this is what this card means to me and this is what that card means to me, then I would get out the book. And the way I would do this is I would literally take a card a day. I would put all of the other cards aside, focus only on that one card, and I would write down everything I noticed about that card. I would look at it and examine it inside and out, upside down. What are the colors I see? Are there figures in the card? If so, what are they experiencing? What are they doing? Are there symbols in the card? Are there things in the card that I don't understand? And what might those be? What is the feeling I get when I look at this card? How does whatever chakra activates when, when a light bulb goes on for you, where am I able to feel that? Where am I able to feel that? And writing a little narration of what is going on in that card, along with all of those things I just mentioned, the colors, the general tenor of the card. When you look at the card, does it feel happy? Does it feel sad? Does it feel intimidating? Does it feel generous? How does it feel? How does it make you feel when you look at it? Then what I would like you to do, and this isn't a perfect world, and I am not saying that I did this, but this is, I think, if I were to go all out, mind erase and start over again with the tarot, this is how I would do it. I would grab a note card for every single one of my tarot cards, and I would jot down all of that information, and then I would tell the story, my interpretation of what I see in that card. Because I'm almost certain that approaching the cards that way, because of the way this particular deck has been illustrated, I look at this particular deck as having been designed to support us in telling the story of the card meanings. So by going through the cards and talking about the colors and the symbolism and the tenor and all of those things, breaking the card down, sort of a brainstorming of just what you see in that card. So for example, the Two of Pentacles, right? Two of Pentacles, we have this guy, and he looks like he's juggling, and he's juggling these pentacles. These pentacles are inside of an infinity sign. And behind this guy, there is an ocean, and this ocean has ships that are being tossed around on the ships, just literally speaking to what you see in the cards. Once you're finished with literally just what you see, and I'm not talking about spending an hour with each card, I'm talking about giving it 5 good dedicated minutes and taking a look at that card and say, okay, if I were to tell the story of this card, what is going on? Well, in the Two of Pentacles, I see this guy. He looks like he's kind of like hopping back and forth from foot to foot, like something's hot. And he's trying to juggle this thing. He's trying to balance it out. He's trying to come to some sort of like comfort level and equilibrium is what it looks like. And when I look at what's behind him, that adds to this feeling for me because this ocean is just going up and down and up and down. So that is just a very basic explanation of what I see on this card. But if you listen to what I say, I just described the card meaning, right? This card meaning is all about learning to balance what's going on in the real world. and learning that things are going to be chaotic and we're going to have to deal with that. And the chaos in the distance is something that we just have to look at, take a deep breath, and move beyond, right? So that's a very long answer to this question, but that is probably the one thing that I would do if I could only do one thing to have a do-over, have a learn tarot mulligan. I think that's what I would do, because I found myself looking at the cards, and I'm not sure if it's because I have an artistic leaning that I just get so tied up in just the general imagery. And it's also why I don't really care for that deck, because I don't think it's an attractive deck. But for me, it was like, for me, because I am the type of person I am who likes all of my duckies in a row and likes things to be clear cut and very understandable, very easy to articulate. Taking that route is not the route that would have been at all comfortable with me or for me. And once I started to look at the cards and compare the cards to the book meaning of them, I backed off what my intuition told me these cards meant. And I got tied into this feeling of memorization. So it's like I blocked this flow that I had that was just naturally there, that if I had taken the time to just say, oh my gosh, this is what's in this card, and explain the whole thing, and gone through the deck and done that first, I believe that it would have been exponentially easier to quote unquote memorize the card meanings. Because what I would be doing is planting the seed of what those cards mean in my mind before I even take a look at the book, and preventing me from being in this space or getting in this space that I tend to get into, which is, oh, well, if it's written down, if it's documented, if it's blah, 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 that's the best way to learn it. I was always a fan of Montessori, early childhood education. When I think about the different approaches that I just described, you've got one which is the very didactic teacher standing up at the front of the board, pointing at the board, children say this, say that, say this, and the other thing. And then with the Montessori program, I just picture, oh, I feel like doing this right now. I'm going to take this and I'm going to learn how to do it. And I'm going to do it in the way that feels right to me. Now, I totally get that that's not exactly Montessori, that there are a lot of rules and regulations and steps to be taken. But what I'm trying to get at is this more natural flow of what feels right to the learner at the time, as opposed to, our 20th century traditional educational model, which we're finding pretty much sucks. So yes, that's what I would do. And yeah, like I said, I would not want to ditch all of the tarot knowledge that I have, especially because it was hard won, the old-fashioned way. But I would really love an opportunity to just try relearning the tarot on this pathway. I got a belly. I do. I got a belly. Okay. All right. Oh my goodness. So yeah, I just sitting here doing my podcast, and my pants are a little tight. So I'm alone. I'm in my office. I unbutton my pants. It's like, oh, there's a little belly there. Yeah, I've always been just like one of those annoyingly rail thin people through not a ton of my own doing. It's very genetic. So it's kind of cracking me up watching my body as I get older. It's like, whew, okay. All right. Activities. Let's talk about activities. We don't need to talk about my belly anymore. Okay. The activity for this week is kind of tied into what we're going to be talking about in a minute, the tarot for self-esteem. What I would like you to do is get out your tarot deck, and you're going to be choosing cards again, but you're going to be consciously choosing cards, right? You're going to be thinking about what card would fit this scenario. The reason I'm offering up these types of activities again is because it goes to that whole storytelling part of what's involved with the tarot. It gets us out of the mindset of this is one card and it's a very black and white linear way of reading to a much more flowing, open, creative, intuitive, and usually much more rewarding reading. So I want you to choose 3 cards. I want you to choose a card that represents the you that you show the world. The you that you step into when you go to work in the morning, or when you go out to dinner, or when you go to the park. Who is that person? Choose a card to illustrate that. Then I would like you to choose a card that illustrates who you are when you are with your close friends and your family, the people you trust, the people you open up to. And lastly, I want you to choose a card that illustrates who you are at your very, very core. Who you are aside from your meat suit, who you are, the person you are when you're meditating or you're doing something and you're so in the zone that you forget you have a body. I want you to choose the card that represents that person. And then all I want you to do is compare the cards and think about where are the differences? Where are the gaps? Do you show your family a different card than you show the world? Are you completely different at your core from what you show the world? So this is an exercise that's sort of double-pronged. The focus is, number one, to get you to look at these cards in a little bit more of a broad fashion. And secondly, just to give you a little nudge, because when I did this, I thought it was very insightful. And because, for me anyway, one of the things that I have worked on over the last few years especially is this concept of authenticity, right? To truly become that person that I am at my core, that person that I am when I'm meditating or when I'm doing pottery or whatever it is, when I'm just like so in the zone, that I am the quintessential me. And it's been a very interesting process. So I'm dragging you all along with me and offering up the opportunity to just, think about the same stuff. And lastly, we are going to talk about tarot for exploring our self-esteem. And along with the whole being authentic thing, the other thing that I have been working on, and it just sounds so corny, so I almost hesitate to say it, but is self-love, right? Self-love minus the gag reflex, because there's so much ooey gooey, gross, over the top self-love stuff out there. that I don't I don't want to be grouped into that kind of just vapid love yourself thing. Self-love is a lot of work, and getting to the point where we value ourselves enough to truly love ourselves, all of that stuff. So, again, sharing with you, bringing you along on the journey here. And when I was preparing for this show, I just have the weirdest things that pop into my mind. And this is one of those things from childhood that has clearly stuck with me. And it really was all about self-esteem and conditioning, and we're going to get into that too. When I was in kindergarten, walked up to the bus stop, and of course that was back in the days when all of the kids were standing at the bus stop, on the 2-lane highway, and nobody really thought much of it. We're just standing there, being unattended, waiting for the bus, being kids, doing whatever we do. And I was a very quiet child. I was extremely introverted. And I was the type who did not want attention drawn to me unless it was positive attention. And one of the neighborhood boys, I will remember him forever, Kenny Miller. Kenny Miller was kind of a bully. He was just one of those jerky, tough kids, and I wasn't. I was a pretty easy target, I think. Anyway, so kindergarten, Kenny Miller and I, for some reason, Kenny Miller spit at me. And even though I was a very timid child, I was also a child, and still am a child, of protecting the underdog, right? And I think my spirit guide popped in, and she spit back at Kenny. And then she was mortified. Oh my God, I just spit at someone. Oh my God, I'm good. Oh my God, it's horrible. Not even thinking like specific punishments or anything, just thinking, oh my gosh, that's horrible. So I'm feeling bad. He can't believe that I actually spit back at him, which, yay me, I guess. But anyway, so he can't believe it. He's flabbergasted. He gets on the bus and promptly tells the bus driver that I spit at him. That, there's nothing coming out about the fact that he spit at me first. So we're both sitting on the front, like in the front of the bus. And you're talking about a little kid who like cried if somebody looked sideways at her. And we're both sitting in the front, and, we're going to have to talk to whomever or whatever. Or maybe she was just putting us in the front seat to keep us quiet. I don't know. But in my little head, we are heading to kindergarten, where he is going to tell Mrs. Jurek that I spit at him. And it's going to be horrible, and I'm going to have to go see the principal, who was a very, very, very tall man and very scary at the time. So what did I do? I got off the bus. Keep in mind, this is 1970. Got off the bus, nobody's paying attention. I walked home. I went around the back end of the school, and I walked, 2-3 miles home. Dragging my book bag with my Walt Disney encyclopedia inside of my, I think it probably was an old Hudson's plastic drawstring bag, dragging it because it got very, very heavy. And yeah, right? So that's my traumatic story. My mother was very traumatized too, I was about 3 houses down from home when my mom just happened to drive by, and she sees her little girl, her little kindergartner, who's supposed to be 3 miles away at school, walking, looking sad, dragging her book bag. I don't think the school ever forgot my mom after that situation. All right, so why am I telling you my traumatic Kenny Miller story? I'm telling you this story because I was so freaking conditioned as a girl raised in the 60s. I was born in 65. So I was very conditioned as the girl. I was conditioned as girls were less. I was conditioned that girls were soft and they were not strong. It didn't matter which part of the male species I interacted with, right? I was either the cute little girl who needed to be protected, or the little girl who cries at the drop of a hat, or, the little girl who is supposed to be cute and not spit back at people, and all of those things, right? I was so conditioned. And I felt so bad because that was something that I was not supposed to do. A nice girl would never do that, right? A nice girl, get this, would never freaking stand up for herself, right? So I started thinking about conditioning. I started thinking about self-esteem and conditioning. And I started to think about how in some ways there's still that little girl in me, right? A good example, let's say, perfect example, right? Last summer, I'm walking home from somewhere and I don't know, I don't look as old as I am from behind. Let's put it that way. Long hair, blah, 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 blah. And these guys drive by and they, hoot out something gross and annoying and whatever. This me, at my age, even still, did not turn around and flip them off or give them what for. I just kept walking, right? I just kept walking because that's what we deal with. And watching social media these days, watching the news, and watching all of these women who are not doing that, right? And I'm cheering these women on big time. And I'm not saying that they have to be jerks. I'm not saying that they have to be rude. I'm not saying anything. But my daughter's generation and younger than her, they don't put up with the same crap. And they have, I think, a better sense of self, a better sense of who they are, a better sense of what they're worthy of, a better sense of what they deserve, and a better, more thorough, actually, a knowledge, because we didn't have that, a knowledge that in Western society, they can go for whatever career they want to go for, and they can achieve it, and they can excel, and all of those things. Still probably not going to make as much as the dude next to you, but we're working on that. So I wanted to really focus on this concept of conditioning. And, if you are my age, if you are, I'm thinking, I don't know, 45 and up, probably, maybe even a little bit younger, you still have some of this conditioning potentially. And how are we going to create the lives that we want if we don't openly accept and love ourselves, right? And I'm not saying, oh, I love myself. Yes, I do. I'm talking about yeah, I freaking love myself. I've gotten to know myself. She's pretty cool. Starting to see yourself through the eyes that other people see you, and all of those things. So, after all of that big long pep talk, we're just going to talk about some questions. However you want to use these questions, but I think that you'll find them very useful in exploring this about yourself. So, number one, How does my conditioning show up in my life? Or maybe where am I conditioned? Because when we start to learn what it is that's conditioned us, then we can start to chip away at that conditioning. How does this conditioning impact how I behave? How does this conditioning impact how I feel about myself? I had a friend in high school who matured early. And she had a very large chest, and I'm flat as a board. And I can remember being so jealous of her. It's like, oh my gosh, you are so lucky. And she's like, no, it's awful. It is awful. Because I can't walk without my books held in front of my chest, and I can't wear a shirt that dips down an inch because some idiotic 16-year-old boy is going to do something or say something stupid. And it's just her body, right? It's just the way it is. No different than mine, right? My long, skinny noodle body and her different one. But I felt like I wasn't mature and womanly, and she's feeling like she's being objectified. Well, she was being objectified. And the guys at that point weren't taking her seriously just as a human being because all they could do is look at her boobs. So a lot of women like that still don't like their bodies because they had all of this negative, critical, or even positive, but pretty darn narrow scope interest in them and because of their bodies. How do I feel about myself? Do I like myself? Am I proud of myself? Would I want to be my own friend? How do I feel about others? Do I feel that others have more right than I to take up space in the world? Do I feel like am I intimidated by other people so I please them so they will like me? Do I behave differently when I'm around these folks because I want them to like me? All of these types of questions to really start to look at where is the conditioning, right? I wouldn't spend a ton of time on necessarily where the conditioning is coming from, because so much of it is, you're going to be able to tie it back to society. You're going to be able to tie it back to your critical grandmother, your, whatever catalyst or catalysts contributed to all of your conditioning. We're all going to trace things back to the same basic core. Now, if you feel like you're not going to be able to get past this stuff until you look at and sort of face up to and analyze what's what and, where you were conditioned and all of that, then by all means, go ahead and do that. But if that is something that you're already, you're like me, it's like, yeah, well, my mom was conditioned because she was growing up in the 50s. My dad was conditioned because he grew up in the 50s. It's pretty easy to identify in a lot of cases. You might want to ask, how did my childhood impact my conditioning? How did my family dynamic impact my conditioning? How did my family's religion, how did my family's spirituality, how did my family's lack of spirituality impact my conditioning? So the whole purpose here is to help yourself get to the point where you're able to identify that when you are treating yourself poorly, when your little voice is being an ass, you can say, okay, wait just a minute. I understand that this or that or this or that contributed to this situation. And I'm not going to let that. I'm not going to let those external things, those external people, those external ideas, social mores impact how I feel about myself. You might want to look at your cultural identity. It's another place, right? Depending on who you are and where you are. I am a colonizer, literally a colonizer. I can trace roots back to the Mayflower, the fucking Mayflower. So that is a part of who I am without even realizing it, right? And someone who had a distinctly different family path. I was raised I was raised as a white girl to an upper middle class family in America. So the only way I could have had more advantage is if I had been a boy, if I had been a male, right? And even with all of that advantage, I was still conditioned beyond belief. And so if your upbringing, so look at your upbringing, I guess, and look at your culture. Look, what baggage might you have from your culture? And certainly not to say that we need to say, oh my gosh, well, I have this baggage from this part of my cultural heritage, so I need to just drop it and get over it. Not saying that at all, but recognizing where we have those feelings, I think can, number one, hopefully help us realize that we don't need to judge ourselves based on that, that we can look at those things and say, yeah, I am so much more than that. I am not who others perceive me to be. So partly that, but also partly just culturally, what has your culture dealt with that has impacted who you are, what the stereotypes are? Every culture has its stereotypes. Every culture has its stuff, right? It's crap. We all have things that we need to be working on. So there are so many areas in our lives where we are conditioned to be a certain way, where we are taught how to be and who to be. And while I would never say you need to forget who you are, because I think that is so important, I think I need, maybe this is just me, to move beyond who everybody else thinks I am, how everybody else sees me. And really all I need to be focusing on, and all you need to be focusing on, is being happy with who we are, right? To say, I don't need that conditioning. I can look beyond that conditioning. I can look beyond the fact that, I left a good job making pretty good money to do what I'm doing right now, sit here and talk to you guys. But this is so much more me than what I was doing before. And it was difficult to leave that because, most people are going to say, well, that's really going to take, it's going to be a hit financially. And, why would you give up something that is decent money and you blah, blah, blah? Because it's not me. And because I'm tired of living in a world where I can't be me. So I just wanted to share this stuff with you. You guys of late especially are getting a lot of my own personal download stuff that I'm sharing with you. But I also know that if I'm feeling a particular way, when there are billions of people in the world, somebody else is feeling pretty darn similar. So if any of my own personal trauma, drama, pathway is helpful to you, then I'm happy to share it as well. All right, I think that is it. So this week is all about self-esteem. It's about valuing yourself. It is about stepping into who you are at your core once you figure that out, and embracing that person, giving that person a hug, giving that person as much courtesy. Think about this. Give yourself as much courtesy as you would give a guest coming into your own home. Think about that. Talk to yourself with at least that much common courtesy and kindness. And see yourself through the eyes of your guests who come over, who love you, who think you are all that. All right. That's my soapbox for this week, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope wherever you are, the weather is turning for the better. Yeah, I think that's it. So take care. Be well this week. Be kind. Be open. And be yourself. Bye-bye. I'll talk to you next week. If you enjoyed this episode of the Learn Tarot with Moxxie podcast, please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. It helps other people find us when you guys are vocal about who we are, what we are, where we are, and what we are. Remember too, if you want to submit a question for a tarot reading, you can sign up on the Moxxie website, and there will be a link in the show notes for below. Those questions are questions that I will consider for using as example readings during podcast episodes. Of course, everything is 100% confidential. There will be no hints or tips about who you are, but it would be a way for you to get a question answered by me and share a learning experience with everyone else. So if you are interested in doing that, in that free reading, please head on over to the Moxxie website where you can sign up. And again, there will be a link in the show notes below. Remember too that the website has a ton of resources and freebies that are available to you that will help you on your tarot learning journey. And lastly, if you want to stay up on the nitty-gritty of what's going on at Moxxie, I invite you to be a free member of the Moxxie community. You just need to hop over there, sign up. I know that we don't always catch